Hello, everyone. Welcome to Jeanie and Guess. We have an amazing exploration of our vocal universe tonight. My name is Billy. I'm the course assistant. I'm just going to give a quick overview of how Zoom works, even though I know we're all very familiar at this point. But for anyone who's new to it, at the bottom of the screen, you're going to see a button that says chat. I'm just going to type hello in the chat right now. Over the course of this evening, if you have any questions for Jeanie or Dominique or Janice or David, please just put them in the chat, and during our Q&A at the end, we'll make sure those questions get answered. We have so much combined expertise tonight as help for lots of questions. We ask that you just use the chat for questions, because otherwise it can get a little bit complicated with ideas and thoughts and your own insights or trying to answer other people's questions. Also, if you're currently in gallery view, meaning you're seeing a whole bunch of tiny faces on the screen, you're going to want to switch over to speaker view. So up in the top right of the screen, you're going to want to click view and then switch from gallery to speaker. And that's all I got to say. Pass it over to Jeanie.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you very much. And thank you to Aaron Petit, who's also there to help us. I am very, very honored to have these three wonderful people who are not only going to be guests tonight, but who are also guest experts at our institute, which we're going to tell you about in 1 second. I want to introduce to you a fabulous jazz artist. She's an amazing singer, and she's also a really experienced teacher. Her name is Dominique Eid, and she's joining us tonight to share all of her expertise and her experience. And then we have Janice Brenner, who is a dancer, choreographer, a vocalist, and a very experienced teacher, and a very busy person. She is an exquisite dancer, and I have had the privilege of knowing her for a long time, and she's my neighbor. So that's Janice Brenner. And then another colleague and friend here in New York is David Sabella. David is an icon on Broadway. He's known by everybody on Broadway, both as a terrific performer, but also a very, very well-known and highly respected teacher. And he's also a classical singer. He's a wonderful countertenor. So he covers all bases with his voice. And he's author of a book called So You Want to Sing Cabaret. And I have to tell you, you can't get all that expertise in one place at one time unless you have connections. And so their bios, their complete bios will be on the chat room if you'd like to know more about them. And we'll also give you more information about them later on. But we want you to know that what they're going to be doing, and the reason they're here is to talk about that, is the Lovetri Institute for Somatic Voice Work this summer in July online. And it is sponsored by Baldwin Wallace University, the conservatory there, and it's in the Community Arts School. We have 3 levels. Dates of those are up from July 9th to the 11th for level 1, the 12th to the 14th for level 2, and the 15th to the 17th for level 3. If you are interested, this is the last year we think will be online. And so the good thing about being online is you don't have to pay for hotel or airfare or transportation or meals. You can do it from the comfort of your home and only pay tuition. So we hope that if you're interested, you'll sign up. We're almost full. So we only have till July 3rd to make up your mind. You do have to take the courses in order if you haven't done them before. And if you want to review, we have a discount for reviewing, and you can get that from Baldwin Wallace, and we'll give you that info later. So without any further explanation or to do, I want to go right to my guests. So welcome, Dominique, Janice, and David.
Thank you, Jeanie.
I am so happy that you're here, and I'm going to start right out with giving us some topics to talk about, but feel free to interrupt each other and stick your own ideas in whenever you feel like that's appropriate. Since all 3 of you are still performers, so you have not stopped performing to teach, I'm interested in you sharing with our viewers how you manage that. How do you manage being a teacher and then being a performer? So David, why don't you start us off on that?
Well, thank you. Yeah, not only do I teach every day, but now I'm singing as we come out of the pandemic. Every other weekend now I'm flying to a different place to do a different concert, either as a tenor or as a countertenor. And that's really tricky because When I'm a tenor, it's not so tricky. I sing as I speak, and there it is. But when I have to be a countertenor, like this past weekend, I did 2 shows this past weekend, and all this week, I literally had to keep talking up here. I just kept my voice up there. I just said, everyone, just forgive me. It's just going to be one of those weeks that the voice just has to stay here for what I need to do. And so you do need to sort of think ahead, mitigate. It's like being, when I was teaching and also being on Broadway, when we perform, your entire day is planned around 2 hours of excellence at 8 p.m. Everything you do in the day is under that umbrella. So, what you eat, how you sleep, what your temperature, everything, because you can't mess it up in those 2 hours from 8 to 10:30. So,
Yeah, the first time I saw Chicago,
yeah,
and that's going back because it's been running a long time. I was
25
very
years.
surprised at the end of the show to discover that Mary Sunshine was not a woman. And
know.
I was
Yeah.
impressed by that.
Thank you. You'd be amazed. Even our music director, when they took a show on tour, like to Vienna, like to European countries, and they had a European cast and a European music director. The European music director turned to the American music director and said, "You didn't use a man for Mary Sunshine?" And he said, "No, we did." No, we did. Nobody really, and I love that. I love that.
Yeah, I love that too. Yeah. Oh, well, all right. Thank you so much. Dominique, why don't you jump in and talk about that difference?
Yeah, that's really interesting, and what a schedule. And I think what's interesting for me is, because I'm teaching technique but also musicianship, ear training, songwriting, all these kinds of nuts and bolts sorts of things. And I love teaching. It's an incredibly creative process. But it is a different network of nerve endings that meet than is performing. And so sometimes I have to remind myself that for what I'm doing, I don't necessarily have to show my work in the column on the right, like a math problem that maybe is something that I would be doing with my students. And yes, the work I'm doing with them does get them to the performance stage, but there's something about that level of creativity where you need to be in the flow. You can rely on the things when you have to, but there's a different kind of creative flow that's going. And sometimes I have to let myself go into that, remind myself that I don't have to explain to myself as if I were my own teacher why this particular, improvised line is going to work or not. So it's a little bit of a head change, but it really complements the teaching, because then I go back and remind myself that's the path that my students are also on. They're not going to jazz practicing school, or music practicing school. They're going to be creative artists in some discipline or another. So it really, in the end, I can't imagine doing one without the other.
Uh-huh. Well, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And Janice, what about you?
Hi, everyone. I agree with that, Dominique. I've been teaching, yes, for 35 years and performing much, much longer. And I used to say when I was younger that my perfect day would be, if I had a blissful, perfect life and day, I would take a morning dance class, the first thing. I would teach a dance class. I would teach a voice lesson. I would take a voice lesson, and then I would perform or rehearse that night.
Nice.
Like that would be, how I would love to live my life if life didn't intrude on being an artist so much. So I think that those things are very intertwined for me too, and that now that I'm older, I if I have to perform, I don't want to do all those things prior to that. I want to do a good physical warm up and a good voice warm up, and then I want to just do the show and not have any other distractions really. But that hasn't always been the case. So I know, like I taught at Juilliard for many years, and not technique class, but improvisation and choreography. So I could warm up a little bit with them, and I could improvise with them as my physical practice. And then I would have to give myself time, a voice lesson of some kind, and then concentrate on a performance that night. I mean, it can be done. But I also loved your idea, Dominique, that the students are there, and I'm there with the students, and we are all practicing being an artist and applying that in our lives.
Yeah, I would say that leads me very nicely into the next question, which is the interface in our different disciplines. Obviously, a theater person does need to be able to move well, and somebody who's going to use movement and voice is combining them in a certain way. And so that I'm going to go back to Dominique and say, well, how much attention do you give to having the person look physically comfortable when they're singing? Is that something you address, or you just sort of leave it to them?
I do address it. I mean, certainly, actually, I'm wearing my technique shirt, because if you're here, the giraffe gets kind of droopy. So I do a lot of body work. I mean, I've done Alexander technique. I've done a lot of yoga. I've just recently started doing Tai Chi. And so I'm just really, and I did dance ballet when I was when I was younger. So I really know firsthand in my own body that if things aren't prioritized correctly, I'm not going to be singing very well. So certainly in terms of just how somebody is in studio with me, how they look in their body. I do a lot of movement. I know that my students are very busy. And so I encourage them to warm up a little bit in the first thing in the morning with some movement so they can do both things together. And I impress upon them that this is your instrument for life, your whole body. And but I'm also respectful that different, body language is a display of motions and inner work that people are doing. And you can't just tell somebody to stand up straight. So there are other things at New England Conservatory where I teach. There's a body mapping class, which I think is a good introduction. Of course, the opera students, I do have some who are opera singers, are taking movement classes, and we also have an acting class. So I can't do all of those things, and they're not necessarily required for students, but they are available. And I take people through the body disciplines that I know to hopefully whet their appetite to find something that is going to keep them working and feeling at play in the body, because I think that's really what has to be happening to not accrue lots of tension and stiffness over time.
That makes sense. David, we know that Broadway performers often have to move pretty vigorously.
Yeah.
And I would say, well, how do you help that happen with your students?
I do work very physically with them. We start out and tying the physicality to the musicality, because also when working with younger students, and I mean like, college age, they don't always have that innate musicality within their body, which they need on music theater. So, we'll do arpeggios to a slow sit and then a slow stand. And we'll do other phrases to where they're walking around to a count of 8 and sitting down on 10. And, trying to get motion in their body, because when they're thinking about what they're doing in their body, the voice is going to function better anyway. So right away, I tie together movement. We'll do exercises in a chair pose, in yoga pose. I have 2 little 5 or 8 pound weights. We pour them out like jugs of milk. We use the body right from day one, and I just find it very, very helpful. There's never a moment in music theater where we park and bark. So we got to be able to do move around.
Yeah. And then Janice, a lot of times dancers don't make sound, but you work with dancers who do make sound. So Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I would talk about it in terms of, although I've been singing all my life as long as I've been dancing, I started working with Meredith Monk, who some of you will know, some of you might not know her. She is sort of the ultimate interdisciplinary artist who incorporates movement and singing and theater and sometimes film into her these multidisciplinary works that she's been doing for 60, almost 60 years. And I started working with her as one of her vocal ensemble members in 1990, so a mere 32 years ago. And she...
I think that's how we met. Isn't that how we met?
Yes, because Meredith, I was cast in a big piece that was called an opera, called Atlas, an opera in 3 parts, and Meredith said, "You need to go to my voice teacher now." So that's how Jeanie and I met 32 years ago. And she, what she does is she calls what she does when she teaches, when we teach, is called the singing body and the dancing voice. So those things, like David was saying, are always interconnected. You don't sing just from here up ever, if you're singing correctly. And to get dancers is, so to answer Jeannie's question about dancers, since I've worked with highly trained, like phenom dancers off and on for decades, sometimes the more highly trained dancer is, if they come from a ballet background particularly, the voice is very closed off because they were never asked to open their mouths, ever, in class. In ballet class, you watch, you do, you imitate, you do what you're told. Same thing in many modern dance techniques as well. The dancers don't talk in technique class. So sometimes that can be very, very choked off, and dancers are very intimidated to sing, let alone talk. Singing is like a big effort, a hurdle. So what I do is, because I come from an improvisational dance background with Alwyn Nicolai and Murray Lewis, we improvise, we loosen the body, we have an experiential kind of movement, and we talk. I start by talking. Dancers talk to each other. Oh, we can tell a story. You're allowed to speak and say something about yourself. And then we kind of take it, oh, what if we kind of sing this? And we sing the story and we throw sound to each other and boom, boom, to get dancers to do that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And it's very cathartic and very therapeutic.
Yeah, the piece that one of the solos that Janice had in Atlas was to play an ice witch.
Yeah, a demon. Yeah, an ice demon.
Ice demon. And so this sound was like, and can you do it, Janice?
Well, I actually played the hungry ghost.
Oh, yeah.
There were also ice demons, but yes, my sound, I had to haunt one of the Asian men. In Chinese culture, there is this thing called the hungry ghost. And so I was atop a 6'5" guy on his shoulders inside a bride dress. So I was 9 feet tall. It's the tallest I've ever been in my life. I'm 5 feet. And I had to haunt him with these sounds that, like, very, very, very high up. I'm going to do it now.
Yes, that's it. And there were 3 of them going on. And I was the voice coach for that.
Yeah.
So
I could only do it once a night.
Yeah.
And recording, when we made the album, I had to do 3 takes of it. And that was it. That was enough. It is a 4-minute piece.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'd love to get Janice's opinion on also the psychology of working with dancers. You know, I've been around a lot of dancers, and I have a few who are students, but my brother, Ernie Sabella, brought up a very important observation about young dancers, because I was talking about one of my students, and he said, well, David, he said, don't you remember, and this is true, Bibi Newworth, she would dance with bloody toes. Like dancers are used to never getting it right, being in pain, and always being told that's not good enough.
Right.
And when you bring that into a voice studio, there's a whole set of psychological things that have to sort of be broken apart to allow them to explore, because right away they always think they're just not ever going to get it.
David, I want to interrupt you. Can you turn yourself up about 15% more?
Why, yes, I can. Hi, how are you?
Yes, that's a very telling point.
Yeah.
Janice, you want to chime in with that?
Well, it's very complicated, as you're noting, and it's a long time sort of endemic situation with the more highly trained dancers who are sort of have always had in their mind that they're aiming for perfection, whatever that means.
Right.
And and that's why, again, it's hard for the highly trained, skilled dancers to open their mouths at all. And yes, and this idea of you're never good enough. I don't know, maybe it's hasn't changed so much in the musical theater world, but it's changed considerably in the modern dance and contemporary dance worlds, that mindset and that kind of authoritative dictatorship of directors and artistic directors and choreographers. And gladly, it's been changing quite a lot. And dancers do that. Even the dancers at Juilliard, they speak up if there's an issue. They go to HR, or they go to the our director, etc. But yes, it is. I think working in the more somatic movement systems that aren't about technique and perfection in that sense. The somatic work, soma means body and movement. Somatic techniques were coined by Thomas Hanna more than 50 years ago, and they include things like what Dominique was saying about Feldenkrais, Alexander technique, Qigong, Tai Chi, yoga, mind-body centering. These techniques for dancers will get them to shed some of the perfection mode that they go for in technique class or in set choreography. So if they can balance both of those things, get more internally sensitized to what their own unique body does, and then also have technique class, and aim for that ideal. Yes, I think they need to have both.
My motto is never let perfection get in the way of excellence.
Oh, I like that.
Wonderful. Oh, yes, I'm going to use that.
I know, we all know that it takes quite a long time to become a master of any of the arts, whether it's dance or acting or jazz or any
Opera.
any expression. To get to a high level takes years and years of hard work. When you're working with students, is there some idea in your mind of suggesting to them that this is a long process and they should give themselves time to get used to it? I think that a lot of young people come in with the idea that, especially with singing, I'm just going to take a few lessons and then I'll be fine. And you have to communicate to them, well, actually, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
David, do you want to talk about that?
Absolutely. And it's gotten just worse and worse with YouTube and TikTok and all that, because people just think they're overnight stars, There are two things that I always say. An overnight success takes 10 years, period.
Yes,
That's
yeah.
what it is. And something my teacher said to me in regards to an operatic career. And when I was in my 20s, I didn't believe it. And lo and behold, it became true. To train a singer for that type of repertoire, it's a 7 to 10 year process, period. It's a 7 to 10 year process. To train a singer for music theater, you're really talking at least 5 years. You know, you've got undergrad, and by the time they get out of undergrad, they've got at least another 2 years, because the undergrad system always lags a little bit what the professional requirements are here in New York and here on Broadway. And they come with a certain set of things that they think are absolutely true, and it's a little bit of dismantling again for them to just sort of relax and like, don't show me you've had so much training, just tell the story. You know, like when you're on stage, I don't want to see your technique. I want to hear the words, right? So that takes them another 2 years to dismantle that and relax in their own bodies and get used to the subway system and know where they're going. And, you know, I mean, it's all about that. It's like, what do we do here in New York, you know? And so at least 5 to 6 years for music theater, 7 to 10 for opera. And I tell them that.
Yeah. And Dominique, what about for jazz?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, I'm teaching, the bulk of my teaching right now is at New England Conservatory, where I've been for almost 4 decades. I'm teaching jazz students, I'm teaching singer-songwriters, a real array. And I think one of the things that's interesting about it over these years is that what the outcome for what the world is for them outside after the conservatory is always changing, right? And so NEC is very, I mean, it's a classical conservatory within which there's a jazz department and a contemporary improvisation department. So there's all these things going on there. And there's a real emphasis on getting a deep musicianship. And so rather than thinking, okay, we're turning out somebody that can go to the club and do a gig, you know, because okay, then what, you know? I mean, I have a student, Aoife O'Donovan, who has played with Yo-Yo Ma. She's a singer-songwriter. She has to be able to recreate, to reinvent herself, dip into that deep musicianship training. And so I'm, you know, now that it's been this long period of time, I can see how rather than coming out and just going to a specific gig that's there, because we don't know what those gigs are going to be. We don't know what they're going to want to do within this cultural context that the music is happening in. So rather than try to package them in some way for something that may be obsolete, we're trying to give them these deep resources, deep musicianship, so that they can create a long artistic trajectory. And I'm really happy to say that, I mean, Luciana Souza and Roberta Gambarini and on and on and on, all of these people have now been at it for quite a long time, and it's really rewarding to see that.
Yeah. And Janice, what about you?
Following David's statement, I echo Martha Graham, who said a zillion years ago, it takes 10 years to make a dancer. So yes, she was the 10-year make a dancer, and my director, Murray Lewis, used to say it takes 7 years. So I guess we were on a faster track. But yes, so it is a deep, lifelong training. And many times, I'm talking about dance now, the women, the girls start young in dance. Usually, I mean, I started at 5. They usually start younger than the men, generally speaking. So sometimes the men or male identifying people start when they're in middle school or high school, and then they say, oh, I'm going to become a dance major in college, and they've had maybe 5 years, 4 years of dance. They just happen to be really talented in the area. But then they have 4 years to go and get from being, a sort of natural dancer with an ability to honing that skill. And as we say, after the 4 years, you become an artist, right? Not just a dancer or not just a singer as Dominique is saying, you become an artist who's integrating all of those years of training. And so, yeah, it's a similar kind of thing. It takes much longer than watching routines on YouTube and learning them in your house, which is great, which is just great. But then you need a teacher to see what it is you're doing technically, what it is you're doing with your posture, with your voice, with all of those things. You need to be in the class, either voice class and some kind of movement or dance class for years.
I mean, I think that being alone and working on something is good for you. If you're in an environment where there aren't any good teachers, better to do that than nothing.
Right.
But we all know that there's no substitute for experienced eyes and ears to give you feedback. And that remains true for the rest of your life. I mean, if I go coach with somebody, which, during the pandemic, nobody did anything. But when I was doing that, I was also being told, oh, you're not opening your mouth enough, or, that phrase, you could have extended that a little longer. And you always need that, because we can't be self-aware of everything all the time. And, if I would go sing for David, I'm sure he'd find all kinds of good things to say to me.
Good things only, yes.
And so then, where do I want to go with this? I know that both Janice and Dominique will sing not necessarily with words, because they're making sound and expressing through sound. Whereas David and I, as music theater singers, are mostly singing with words. And so what's the counterpoint there? Obviously, Janice can sing in words, and Dominique's definitely going to sing with words, but we don't drop the words out quite so much as you might.
Before we get to that, before I forget, I wanted to just say about the last point. The big issue I have with students, not so much like how long it takes, but keeping them in process for however long it is. Because today's mentality of student, they think, I'm going to learn it, I'm going to go do it, I'm going to be a star, I'm going to get a job, I'm going to get a job, I'm going to get a job, I'm going to get a job. And how long, when will I be on Broadway? And how long, and can you help me find an agent? And can you recommend? I'm like, listen, our job in this room is the art of it. My job is not the commerce of it. My job is the art. Your job with me is the art. Commerce is somebody else's business. Getting an that's somebody else's job, right? So just trying to keep them in the art and craft of it is very tricky. Just want to throw that out there because of today's YouTube mentality that I'm going to learn it, I'm going to splash it up. People put their rehearsals, people put their first run-throughs on YouTube and call it a show.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not really it. You're not even memorized yet. You just happen to get a good take, or you spliced 2 or 3 or 10 takes together and you put it up on YouTube. That's not the way it goes. And kids today don't know that. I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah. Billy tells me you're still not loud enough.
Oh,
Wow. He's very loud in my
I hear him
headset.
fine, but Billy's telling us no.
Billy, raise your volume.
I have it jacked all the way up.
Okay, I'm going to try even more. I'm way up now.
You were shaking your head. What are you going to say about that?
Which part? Your question?
Any of it.
Jeanie, or so I'm going to put one little thing that's going to go back 2 questions and just say how, in a way, ironic it is. I'm teaching at a jazz camp, Interplay Jazz and Arts, and on Wednesday night there's going to be swing dance, and the people who don't want to dance are the musicians. And I think that's so interesting how these we get very, very specialized, and yet how movement can teach us so much. And in fact, the 2-step, which is long, short, long, is a 6-bar phrase. And it drives musicians crazy. It's like, wait, how's it, But anybody from, any walk of life is learning that and not overthinking it. So it's just funny how, and I experienced the same thing that you were mentioning about classical dancers, ballet dancers. I get it with classical pianists in my studio. Wonderful singers who've had years and years and years of classical training, but can't let go of it to suddenly play an improvised something or other,
Yeah.
so it is really interesting. And in a way, it kind of relates to the thing Jeannie was saying about language. I mean, I've always sung wordlessly and I've always loved it. And I've never, I mean, it's sort of Pentecostal or something. I never really feel like I've abandoned the words. I feel like I'm, you know, I'm
Playing with them.
in some deeper primordial, babble of something. So, and then the other thing about that I'll say about the, some of the differences, because I do coach, people singing all different kinds of music. And I think one of the things in jazz is, people will say, well, you have to be true to the song and true to the story. But Black jazz singers came up singing a lot of racist lyrics that they had to sing with some irony and some tongue-in-cheek and imbue with a little different. So it's like, maybe I'm not going to tell that person's story. Maybe I'm stepping up on this platform, which is the platform I'm given within this culture, but I'm going to show you something else. It's going to mean something else when I sing it. So I do feel, I love words. I mean, I'm a writer. I read poetry. I read, I was an English major at Vassar before I went on to become a singer. I love, 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 love words. And I never feel like I'm abandoning them, but I'm also extremely in tune. If I'm working with Jeannie and she doesn't feel the story, I don't want her to miss story, so I really value that. But I'm never not singing words because I don't value them, and I always hope that my improvising can give somebody a feeling of emotion and story. It's not just to sing some crazy diminished scales or something.
Yeah, I would say that the first time I saw Graham's dancers, I didn't see her, but I understood how the body could be very evocative of emotion,
Right.
Without words. And I thought, oh yeah, if you're frightened, you don't have to say I'm frightened. Your
Right.
body can say
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Go
One
ahead.
thing.
No,
Oh, go ahead, Janice.
In relation to that, to Martha Graham, she taught actors. She taught at the actor studio. She taught very, very famous actors how to use their body and express emotions without words as well. So just that comment, and also going back a little bit, I also want to add from what David was saying about young dancers or young performers who think they just got it and they're put their thing on YouTube and they're going to be a star. What is beautiful to me has been working with young artists, high school into college, and like I said before, watching them transform from thinking I'm a competition dancer, I'm a competition singer, to becoming an artist, and they grok that. I see them become that in the course of their studies because they have all of us. They have experientially qualified teachers to imbue that, and that they don't feel when they come out. I would say to a T, none of them feel like I'm going to put my videos on YouTube and then I'm going to be a star. They understand that there's a path, and that of course they're going to go to auditions and they're going to find a particular maybe dance companies or theater or musical styles that they want to follow in their own individual paths. But I have to say I've been so touched and moved by seeing that transition into knowing that it's very hard work and it's not just about being a star. It is so not about that. It is about the work, and it is about the artistic integrity of what you are doing.
Right, right. I'd like to say something about the words since we were talking about that. I very rarely sing without words, right? Sometimes I've done a few numbers that are scat numbers, have some scat in them, but I'm a word singer. And one of the things I say is, as singers, we are the only instrument that does not play notes. We play words. And so I'm very big on the students. They have to do it as a monologue for me first. They have to act it as a monologue. They have to take it out of prose form. Poetry is written in such a way that every line, the first letter is capitalized. And there are errant punctuations wherever and wildcat, and subconsciously that plays with their delivery. Mm-hmm. Even the way it's printed on the page. And so I make them take it off the page, print it out margin to margin, take out all the wrong capitals, put in a comma where they think a comma would be in grammar if it's not there, put in all the right punctuation, tell that story, act it as a monologue. And then what happens is they're basically in line with the rhythmic cadence that was written on the page. Wow. And if they don't come to it that way and they go to rhythm first, it's a series of quarter notes and clicks, right? It's like, I don't want to hear quarter notes. I don't want to be able to solfege this. I don't want to hear the note value. I want to hear the words, And so to get them to take it off the page, let's just agree that common performance practice, at least in music theater, is that the cadence of language jumps over the written rhythm on the page. I don't mean obliterates it, but if you've got steady quarters for 8 measures, you're not going to say every syllable that way, because we don't talk that way. Right. So cadence of language has to take over, and on the page is the only place on the planet where notes go up and down. Notes don't go up and down in your throat. Let's just get rid of that.
Or the overtones.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Right? So the page really messes us up, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. One of the things that was interesting for me when I was first teaching, now, I've been teaching for 51 years, as I encountered different singers in different kinds of styles, coming out of first classical and in music theater, when I first encountered jazz vocalists, I was like, oh, these people think differently than I do. And my first reaction was, what are they thinking? What are they trying to think? And then Meredith was the same. Working with Meredith, I didn't understand her mindset. So I wanted to understand, what's the mindset of a jazz vocalist? What's the mindset of a music theater vocalist? What's the mindset of a Meredith Monk avant-garde performance artist? And then later of a rock singer and all these other genres, of gospel singer. And I discovered that each of the criteria in each of the styles was unique to that style. And within that style, there was plenty of personal variation, but there was something holding that thing that we call style together that was cohesive. So in this case, it's like the emphasis in music theater on the words, or as Dominique was saying, some, yes, words, but sometimes not. And Janice, movement, yes, but sometimes with sound. Those are, in my thinking, those are mindset differences. And it doesn't matter which way you get into the depth of the integrity of the art, as Janice so beautifully put it. You got to still, at some way, whichever way you get in, all the directions, you got to get to that. What is it that's unique about your point of view in whichever art you're doing? And so, I want you to talk a little bit amongst yourselves about your own mindset in your own expression. Like, do you have in your mind something that you want to consider your goal, or what your heart would want to be the essence of the communication in your own work? And maybe that's not something you can even answer, but what the heck?
I'll go with one word: authenticity. It has to be authentic to who I am, my point of view, and I do try to instill this and teach this, in all my students and classes, especially in the world that I'm in now, which is very largely the solo vocal performance in the small intimate clubs. I have a lot of students that play clubs that are 200 seats, these small cabaret and jazz clubs, and we are right there. The person is right there, the audience member. You've got to look them in the eye. You've got to talk to that person. Well, that's a whole different thing right there. You lose your track immediately when you're actually looking at someone and connecting. You have to be authentic. It has to, the words you're not, there's no fourth wall. You're telling a story as if people were in your living room. And that translates to the stage. I mean, Barbra Streisand does that at Madison Square Garden. There is a way that intimacy and that connection crosses the footlights, but it has to start with the authenticity of that person telling their own story. I very often, create my own arrangements of songs. I'll put two songs together that are not necessarily meant to go together. I'll change the accompaniment of a song so that it, makes you think of something else. Like whatever is your authentic thing. Now, I'm not auditioning for music theater with that type of repertoire. That's my own personal performance, Right. But auditioning for music theater, and they always say, look just to the left of their ear, or I will try to land one or two phrases right in someone's eye. I will talk to someone for one phrase and then move on. Talk to someone else at the table for one phrase and then move on. Because you want to make that contact. You want to make that human contact. I think it's very important, And I will say, I forgot this before, about staying in process, right? Okay, never getting the same process. Here's the blessing of those horrible 18 months we all spent online, right? There were no jobs. There were no auditions to go to. Finally, it was the year, I swear to God, that I dreamed of with all my students. Let's not think about auditioning for anything. Let's just do a year of technique. And lo and behold, the whole world got to do a year of technique. Well, that turned out to be a blessing for me. My kids after that went, vroom. So I just want to say that about the pandemic.
Wow.
Well, I've had the great privilege of seeing the three of you in different performances, and I'm always blown away. I've always felt that you represent the very highest level of artistry and uniqueness, and that's why I'm very honored that you're going to be teaching at the Institute, because the people who come there are going to get the benefit of people working in the industry who also are teachers and who know both sides of the coin in each of these worlds. And I think that, I guess I want to ask Dominique, like you said, you're working with all different kinds of styles, not just traditional jazz, but all sorts of stuff. Does the style that the person is singing in have an impact on what you do with them?
It's interesting because I don't really think about style very much. Because I feel like if we are detailed in what we're doing with the music, the style emerges. I mean, I would, if somebody's working on singing, singing a bossa nova, of course I'm going to say these are rhythmic components, or, learning a walking bass line to understand what it might mean to swing and getting into the musical details. But in terms of how that translates into that particular singer and what they do with it, because if you think about it, it's definitely true in jazz. You alluded to that already, that, you can have a voice like Chet Baker, or you can have a voice like Sarah Vaughan, right? So I don't want to teach somebody to be jazzy, It's not that interesting, you don't want to be classic,
Right.
And a lot of times the superficial, artifice of what people think the style is. Oh, I'm going to sing with lots of vibrato, that makes me classical. No, well, that would be a result of all of the considerations of the history of the music and the line and the lineage of your teacher and all of these kinds of things. So I let people, I'm not, I love to be able to think it's possible to teach voice without too many aesthetic boundaries if you don't want to have them. And your work, Jeanie, has been so important to me for that. But of course, I'm not teaching people tube and throat singing, or I'm teaching something within some parameters. But I will say, it doesn't work for me. That line didn't work for me. That's my aesthetic. If you don't feel that, convince me otherwise. So I will let people know what my feeling is about something, and certainly address those things. And sometimes it could be all aesthetics, but I don't expect that person to walk out and replicate something that I did. And honestly, my students sound really different from each other. People sometimes go like, "Oh, I knew that was one of yours," but then there's like 5 others that go by it that they didn't identify, and I'm glad for that. Really glad for that.
I know somebody who said, "Oh, that's so and so's student," and I cringe, because I would hate for people to identify my students like that.
Yeah.
But Janice, you go ahead and comment on this before I say anything.
Well, I actually wanted to segue back to what David was saying about authenticity and what we each do in our own work to get to that place. I've had an interesting, very circuitous journey through dance and music and singing and life, as we all have. But what I've come back to, in a way, is solo performing at my age, which is, I'm in my 60s. And I was doing solo performing when I was in my 30s. After I left Murray Lewis Dance Company, I was doing my own work, which incorporated voice work in the dance work, and doing short solos, a program that I toured actually all over the world. And then I got lonely being by myself on the road, and then I formed a dance company in the late 80s so I could be around other human beings, and we could bond in the work. So I did that for more than 30 years. And now, actually pre-pandemic, it had already started that the dance company was falling away because of just the times that we're in and the impossibility of touring and who's hot and who's in and who's the flavor of the year and all of that stuff. And I segued back to making solos on myself. And I discovered that I had all these personal narratives to share. And I was going to try to put everything that I've ever done as a performer and a teacher, in a way, into this work. So I made a piece called Inheritance, a Litany, about my parents and how the older you get, the more you turn into your parents, in ways that are obvious and ways that I never realized before. And I made this piece, and I said, I'm going to sing my heart out. I'm going to dance as well as I can at this stage. I'm going to do comedy, because that's my shtick. And I'm just going to throw everything in there in a 48-minute piece. And I did this, and it was a storytelling nonlinear play. And I premiered it this little off-Broadway piece on Theater Row. And it won Best Performance, and it won Best Score, and it won Best Lighting for my husband, and a Critics Award. And I just say that because for those of you who are out there and maybe not be 22 years old, there's a richness in all of this life experience and all of these artistic genres that can still be mined and exploited in a good way, and explored. And this kind of work has, I've sort of had a renaissance, like a rebirth in the work, in being an artist and what my path is. And so I want to encourage, people who have been doing this for many, many years. Maybe their voice is changing, maybe their body is changing for sure. There are so many things that you have to offer that is your wisdom of your years as an artist. And so that's what I find now is what David said, authenticity.
Janice, what was what was the score for that piece? Was it you singing live,
No.
or was?
It's really a complicated piece. The score was by Jerome Begin, who was my cohort at Juilliard, who co-taught with me. He's the music director of the dance division, right? So he's an incredible composer, prolific, has composed so many scores for dance companies and other projects for hip hop dancers. But this was the second score he made for me, and I'm singing recorded singing in it, and then I'm singing live over my own recording, and then I'm talking over his music, and then I'm storytelling over some of his music. So it's very layered, but the score is very evocative, and some of it is, the score itself is recorded, but there's all these live layers over it.
That sounds fantastic.
It does.
Let us know when you're going to do that again.
I did it 8 times in New York, pre-pandemic, and once just 8 months ago, after 21 months of not performing at all, the longest we've ever gone in our entire lives. And I'm doing it in 2 weeks. I have my first tour post-pandemic down at the American Dance Festival.
Good. Well, we're going to have a point at the end where you're going to talk about your upcoming stuff. And in just a few minutes, we're going to have a little movement break with Janice. But then after that, I want to talk a little bit more. We've been talking about the art and the kind of the overall philosophy of our work as artists. And I want to talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of it, as David said, the mechanics of a career. Primarily because some people in our audience who are viewers may be isolated, maybe have never been to a big city, maybe they don't know, we're here at Janice and David and I are in New York, Dominique is in the Boston area. They may be in a small town, they may be in a foreign country that doesn't have the resources that we have. And I want to talk about if you were going to do this in your local church, or you were going to do this in a local community theater, or a small restaurant where they might have some jazz in the corner. How can we talk about that in a way that might be helpful to those people who don't have access to the resources that we all have? And we're all spoiled, because I know for sure that Dominique has played with some of the best musicians on the planet. And of course, David's working with the best professionals on Broadway, and Janice is working with people who are the best dancers. So I'm going to try to get us to nail down some of the particulars of what can we do to help people who are watching who don't have our resources to still know what would make me not, if I got up and performed in front of people, how would I know that I was being professional enough to get by? Like, I'm going to try to nail that down. I know that's hard, but I'm always about being as practical as possible. And I'm trying, I guess, because I'm very influenced by my own background, my own upbringing. My mother was a professional dancer in New Orleans, and my first training was dance. And her sister was a singer, professional singer. And she sang with a big band. I think maybe it was Jack Teagarden. I think that's what it was. But she wasn't a very good singer. She couldn't stay on pitch.
Right.
But this was in the 30s, and she was beautiful, and she was very appealing, so they stuck her in the front of the band.
Wow.
And so all of this was without formal training, and yet they were able to work primarily out of New Orleans. And I then always feel like, well, if I was in a small town and I still really wanted to sing jazz, or I really wanted to do music theater, or I really wanted to move and make sound, can I make that work for myself? So we're going to have, Janice is going to do a little movement break for us.
Oh, wow.
And then after she's done, I'm giving you warning, I'm going to ask you to nail some of that down for viewers who might be working with people who are not as, they're not as lucky as we are in the rarefied atmospheres that we have. Okay, so Janice, it's all yours.
Wow. Okay. Hi, everyone. I thought that, we've all been living our lives on Zoom for 2.5 years. And some of these discussions are just so fantastic, but we're sitting on our tushes the whole time. And I think it would be nice if you can stand up. I'm going to stand up in my little space and do a little warm up. I'll talk about it in a minute. If you want to remain sitting, that's fine, as long as you could possibly move forward so that your feet are on the floor and you're not slouching back in a chair, but you're sitting up as if you were standing.
Jerry?
Jerry? Oh, I heard Jerry. Yeah, so, and if you're lying in bed, well, have a good time. You can do as much as you can, or you can also take notes if you'd like to do that. So when I talked about this thing we call somatic practice, somatic movement practices, such as yoga, qigong, tai chi, what we call Feldenkrais technique and Alexander technique. These are all techniques that put us into the internal state of our body. It's called listening to what the body is doing and telling us, rather than sort of an outside imposed technique, physical technique. So, for instance, and all of these somatic practices, I would say the two things that are really important to all of them, as individual and different as they all connect to the breath. They all talk about the breath, and in singing, of course, you need to connect to the breath. The other thing is that they all work in a kind of slow mode. There's no 5, 6, 7, 8. There's none of that in yoga or qigong, etc. So we're going to slow down a little bit our body and our mind. We're going to tune in to the internal way the body is feeling, and sensing. And we're going to just wake up the breath as well. So I'm going to do just a little bit of qigong, which is one of the most ancient systems of moving ever. It's supposedly 4,000 to 5,000 years old. Tai Chi came a few thousand years after that. And yoga also is one of the oldest practices. So, Billy, I'm going to take my headset off now and switch to a live.
Sounds great.
Yeah. Can you still hear me, everybody?
Sounds
Thumbs
wonderful.
up? Yes? Okay, so I'm going to stand up. You can decide how you want to be. And you can see me and hear me? Yes? So the first thing I would like you to do is just do a little shaking. I know you can't see my legs, but I'm just vibrating. I'm just shaking a little bit, not vigorously, just a little bit. Like I'm shaking my hips from side to side. And I'm letting myself wobble. You know those things on the back of cars, those little head wobbly things? Just see if you can not do anything with your head, but just because you're shimmying and shaking a little bit, your head is also just sitting on the neck and is available. And we're going to make a sound. I won't be able to hear you. I know you're out there. And we're just going to sigh or moan or groan, whatever you need to do. And it connects to the little vibration. You can find any pitch that you like that feels comfortable in your throat. Just lightly. You hear my vibration of my voice. Ooh, That's it. And just from that, doing that for a minute, just see how you feel. What's happened to your heart rate? You feel that it's sped up a bit? What's happened to the heat that might be coming out of your forehead? You can touch your forehead and see you generated some heat. And you might also be feeling your pulse in your wrists. Just tune into that for a second. Great. Okay. And now we're going to do that. That wasn't Qigong, by the way. That was just Janice. It was the Janice technique. So now we're going to do a little Qigong, and my legs are a little bit apart, right? What we call like a wide second position. And I'm just going to twist, rotate my arms, and they're hitting back here near your kidneys. You're giving your kidneys a little love tap. And if you feel like it, you can add your head to look in the direction that you're twisting. If that makes you dizzy, don't do it. You can just look forward and feel the twist right up the whole center of the body. And as you're knocking, Qigong calls this knocking on the door of life back there. And now we're going to switch to giving a little taps here on your own shoulder. Give it a good slap. Wake up. This wakes up not only just the area that you're slapping, but the whole chest, pecs, neck, and neck stem up to your head. Now switch to a little tap right here, right on the clavicle. Not hard, just with a tap with love. And you're going at your own pace. You can breathe whenever you need to. Great. Okay, slap. Slap down the inside of your arm and slap up the outside. Slap across and slap down the inside. You can hear that I'm really, giving it a good slap. And up the outside to across, and then just take your fingertips like you're opening up your heart center. Take it up. Little love taps to your neck. And why not? Let's go up to our head. I know my brain needs a lot of attention, everything that's going on. I'm doing this with loose fingers. Whew. Great. The last thing we'll do is just a little stretch. So I'm taking up an arm. You can do this mirroring me if that's best. So my right arm is up, your left arm would be up, and I'm holding onto my wrist. And I'm just going to bend over and stretch and notice where the tension is in my shoulders, my neck, and exhale and let all that tension out. And then pull a little bit more, stretch over, inhale through your nose, and exhale, and relax. Other side, wrist, press your palm out into the space. Notice where the tension is, breathe into the nose. You can make a little sigh on the exhale. Once again, and stretch a little further if you'd like, up the side, and release. Great. And now the last thing is, we're just gonna bounce. Again, I'm in a wide second, and I'm just very gently bouncing. And while I'm bouncing, I'm going to make a sound. And you can do this on a trill. You can trill your lips, or your teeth or your lips. Right? So I'm just bouncing, and I'm just going to let out this crazy trill sound. I'm vibrating. Any notes you like, high, low. Or trilling tongue. Dropping into your weight. Slow it down. I hope everybody is breathing much more deeply now and has some breathing and energy to the body. Thanks,
Yes, thank you,
everyone.
Janice. That was fabulous. Thank you so much. What a wonderful little break for us all to be soma for a while because we've been so psyche.
Is everyone back?
I think so. Okay, so if I want to be, I want to be able to sing some, let's say, American Songbook jazz, nothing really esoteric or complicated. What kind of criteria would you suggest, Dominique, for someone who might not be in a big city or maybe doesn't have access to a sophisticated teacher? You have any practical suggestions for that?
Sure. We can't go it alone completely, but I do consider recordings a primary source, and radio and recordings were important for the jazz players all through the different eras of jazz. So listening is really important. I think one of the things that's really hard right now is so much music is available to people that they don't know how to curate it themselves. When I would I'd get an album, it was like this physical, tangible thing, and I'd take it home, and there it was, and it's basically saying, play me and sit down and listen to me, and 33 minutes or whatever goes by, and you're going to turn it over and listen to the other side. It's a very physically interactive thing. Now, people can have the entire Blue Note catalog on their cell phone, right? But what's going to compel you to go to it? And that's where I think you need to become kind of the curator of your own listening. If you hear a Billie Holiday song and you're really moved by it, what period of Billie Holiday was that? Who was she recording with? Was that Teddy Wilson, or was that a Count Basie? Try to figure out what is the history of this music, so that when you're learning things, you're not just picking up. It's fake books, but now it's the iRealB, which again is in the phone.
Right.
Talk about not words. It has no melody.
Right.
It has chord changes. There was always been like little cheap fake books like that, but people don't know the music as well now because, strangely enough, technology has made it so available, but not really in its authentic form.
Well, that's a copyright issue. They can get away with that because they stopped printing the words. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but then it turns out that people don't hear how the melody relates to the harmony well enough, and all kinds of issues, and by the way, going back to lyrics, the jazz instrumentalists that I've worked with, from drummer Billy Hart to pianist Fred Hirsch, they know the lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
They know the words, and their playing is informed by it. So steep yourself in it and become a curator. If you like that Billie Holiday song and it turns out it was a Gershwin song, well, what other Gershwin songs were written that you might be interested in? What show was that from? So don't just kind of expect it to come to you, or you get a how-to book and everything just kind of goes in order. You're really the curator of all of these resources, and so don't be afraid to dig in. And if you can find at least one person to go along with you on that ride. So when I was an English major at Vassar, I mean, that's not exactly a culturally bereft place, but that's not the right word, but you know what I mean. I did play in a band, but I found one person, the bass player, who really understood what I was interested in. It didn't matter that we weren't a full rhythm section. It didn't matter that he wasn't even a traditionally accompanying instrument. We would get together and jam and play. So try to find at least one person that you can at least get that creative spark going with, and then you begin to build a repertoire that's meaningful to you. And of course you want to consider, you know, as Jeanie was saying, if you're going to get a gig in the local cafe or something, you know, what are the kinds of, what do other people sing if they sing there? Or, you know, can you look at videos of people playing in comparable places? And of course you can learn that repertoire. But I think if you're interested and you find a partner in crime, you know, or a couple along the way, you can build it. You can build it.
Well, that's great advice, and that's definitely available to anybody anywhere.
That's
we
right.
We can all have those those resources. David, suppose somebody wants to try to do a little cabaret. What kinds of practical advice would you give them if they're not near a big city where they have other people they can work with?
Yeah. We're very spoiled in New York City that what we do have here are fantastic arrangers and people who can listen to your story and create a song experience around your story. You know, I work very often, you might have just seen him leave, with Mark Hartman. Mark, I've known Mark for 24 years. He knew my husband before I knew my husband. And my husband passed in 2019, and so we did this song together that was just a very different arrangement. And all I had to say to him was, this is about Tom. And immediately he created something very different. So that partner, and like Dominique said, doesn't have to be a pianist, could be a bass player, could be a flautist, could be anybody. That partner that you can make music with that is not afraid to play. Just play. Dictate the words. Here's the thing. Be attracted to a song because of what it says, not because of how it sounds, right? Because everything about how that song sounds can change. If you like the words, I have a student, she wanted to sing Defying Gravity in her act. This is no way should she sing it like the way it is, right? I'm like, great, we're going to turn it into a jazz ballad because you're talking about your divorce and how you're moving on from your divorce and you're defying gravity. And it's just a whole different song. It warped her head. It's like, what? I'm like, yeah, you're not going to sing like Idina Menzel. Who needs to hear anybody sing that like Idina Menzel? You need to sing those words in a way that's authentic to your experience and the story that you're telling. You want to be an artist, a creative artist, not a recreative artist. You're not recreating anybody else's performance. So be attracted to the song by what it says. Write out the lyric. Be as authentic as you can. If you think that two lyrics go together in some weird way, what I do is I dictate it into the phone, all the lyrics the way I want. I send it to Mark. Lo and behold, we come up with an arrangement, you know, of songs that are very unique to my experience and universal to everyone's experience. That's also important. It's not therapy. You're not doing therapy on stage. Otherwise, you have to pay the audience. They're not your therapist. They're paying you to be entertained. So it has to be a universal experience born out of your truth and authenticity. That's art.
Right. And they
David,
can do
are you
that anywhere,
Okay.
right? They don't have to be in any special place to do that,
No.
right?
No.
Dominique, did you want to add something?
Oh, I was just going to, when they're talking about words, is anybody a Cicely Berry fan?
The acting teacher?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love her. Love her.
Yeah, I've seen her teach several times when now she's retired, but when she was teaching, and she was just a really gifted teacher.
Incredible.
And she was in, for people that don't know her, Cicely Berry was in London. She worked primarily with Shakespeare, but she was very movement oriented, and she was a firecracker as a person, and just really dynamic.
Yeah.
When you were saying the thing about not looking at how it's written on the page, it's true of even an instrumental line. The meter of it is like the least important thing. It's all the accents along the way, which are not necessarily going to be, the strong downbeat, etc. But I was thinking, I sometimes show Cicely Berry to my students, and then another teacher exercise I do was a different acting coach who had the students whisper the text, and I did this with somebody who was singing Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, and when they said they were going to sing it, I was like, I could in my mind hear it, asked me how I knew, and I was like, oh, and so we whispered it, and they, although she didn't have to change the duration of that note, and although that note is on the first beat and two beats long, if you whisper it and you need to be intelligible, they asked me how I knew, then the whole line goes, so it's fantastic, and you can borrow from all different kinds of disciplines to learn your craft. If you don't have a good music teacher, study something else, study some acting, or good piano teacher, study some drumming. All of these things can be brought into what you do.
We have here in New York, we have something called the Cast Party on Monday nights at Birdland, and it's an open mic.
Oh, nice.
It's an open mic with a jazz trio. Billy Stritch at the piano, and Dave Silliman, and I forget who is on drums, but it's fantastic. And I go, and I'm always surprised. And you have to be up on your game to do that. You bring 3 charts and bum bum.
Yeah.
Or you can call a song. And I was there one night, and this woman who must have been known to them, I'd never seen her before, she calls out, Misty, B flat, hard swing. I went, huh? And they did it, and it was fantastic. I'm like, wow, what a different take on that, So everything about the song can change, except the lyrics. That's the story you're telling. Yeah.
Janice, what about?
I would. So what I would say is about trying to do things on your own when you're in the hinterlands, or I know I grew up on Long Island, and Long Island, we had
that's the hinterlands.
we had some we had some culture. Occasionally, we had the Westbury Music Fair and things that we could go to, but mostly we were on our own. And so, like you were saying, to find somebody, I found my best friend, who is still my best friend 60 years later. She's Michelle Rosen, and she's here.
Nice.
Yes.
And she is one of the 2 senior faculty of the Institute.
Right.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
And
Hi, guys.
yes, Michelle. So, it's just another one of those amazing confluences that Michelle and I grew up together. And we made ourselves into little artists. We were singing when we were all through grade school, and we were taking dance classes. And by the time we got to middle school, we wanted to be the new Joan Baez, Judy Collins, Joni Mitchell, all put together with our long hair, parted in the middle, and we encouraged each other.
Now that's style.
we inspired each other. We made a little duet folk group. We played gigs at 13 years old around town, my father booked us. Our first or second gig was at the ACLU fundraiser.
Yeah.
We sang protest songs, and we're still singing protest songs, aren't we all? Right?
Yes, indeed.
So we made it happen, for ourselves because we had each other, and we had a similar kind of point of view about singing and musical theater. So I think that's a really important thing. I mean, that has we've sustained that through 60 years.
Fantastic.
You have a person in the middle of Kentucky, who you want to go to take a dance class with. You can find that these days. Every town seems to have a little, Miss Daisy's competition dance studio.
Mm-hmm.
They're everywhere. And a lot of them end up coming into New York or taking a summer course or taking a winter course and going back to their hometown and making it happen there, building their own little studios, getting groups together, to do musical theater, to put on plays.
Yeah,
and I think that's how it happens.
I have my cousins, I guess this would be my cousin's granddaughters, all took dance classes in the suburbs that they lived in outside New Orleans, in a small town.
Right.
And they loved their dancing and so forth. And when I was there, I would watch them. And I bringing my New York eyes, thought, this isn't so good, just dancing. It was a lot of arms and smiling.
Yeah.
But okay, they had fun.
Right.
But one of the 4 daughters was very serious, and she went to school and she got a degree, and now she's a working dancer out of LA.
Right.
And she started in this little dinky place with this little kind of not great training.
Yeah.
But it motivated her to go to a professional school in LA and then get a degree. And now she was recently on the Grammys as backup dancer.
Wow.
And it wasn't like she had any connections with anybody. She didn't. I certainly didn't know anybody that I could refer her to there in a small town. But she basically did exactly what you just said, Janice. She went to the local school where all the little girls went.
Yeah.
And she found out that she really loved to dance, and then the rest came from there.
Yeah.
Plus,
I think it can happen anywhere.
Let's rethink the whole hinterlands thing for a minute, because the pandemic really brought us all so close together with online technologies that are synchronous.
Yeah.
Whether it was Jam Kazam or what was the other one, Sound Jack, or that, I use Jam Kazam. I have students now in Chicago. There are arrangers here in New York that are on Jam Kazam.
Wait, David, a lot of people aren't going to know what that is. Explain what that is.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
So Jam Kazam is an online program, a platform, that if you have it and the other person has it, you are connected together in a musical session that has no lag. There's no lag. I can play the piano and they sing at the same time. We both hear each other. There is no lag. It's an amazing technology. I was a big, heavy advocate of it for the NATS community, National Association of Teachers of Singing, at the start of the pandemic. And there are fantastic arrangers and music directors who are on Jam Kazam, who, if you get this program, and if you have nothing, if you don't have a microphone, if you don't have a computer, it costs about $200 to get a little bundle of technology to be able to use Jam Kazam. And then that can connect you to really high quality music arrangers, directors, instrumentalists all across the country. And Chris Denny's on it, Ted Firth is on it, Billy Stritch is on it, like really good pianists, music directors who can create with you, who all through the pandemic also had nothing to do.
Right.
You could never get to Ted Firth before, but now you can reach Ted Firth and say, hey, can we jam for a little bit? Yes, of course. We're still coming out of it, They were not fully back to it.
Yeah.
So these people are more accessible than ever and willing to work with people of varying abilities and talents. Please don't ever think yourself unworthy to ask someone to work with you. Of course you should. You know, everyone wants to be helpful. Everyone wants to create art.
Yes, and if you do find someone who is arrogant and condescending and
Yeah.
says, "Well, I'm this famous person and I don't work with little shrimp like you," run away,
Run away. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the highest level people are often the most kind and helpful
Yeah.
and are never going to put you down. And I worked with lots of people trying to understand jazz. Now, I would never ever call myself a jazz vocalist, but I did learn more. And of course, I had great respect, always have had great respect for jazz artists, because I could never do what they do. But as I appreciated what they were doing, and I kind of stuck my toe in the water and sang a little bit of scat and a little bit away from what I was used to, I began to really understand, oh, wow, this is such an amazing thing that these people can do. And that's what happens as you interface with others, especially if they are knowledgeable and generous, and many of them are. Certainly these three people are about as generous as you could ever ask anyone to be. That's going to rub off on you. That's going to have an impact on you. I was very lucky because when I grew up in Connecticut, the first stuff I did a performance of Music Man, and I played Marion. But the people who were doing the directing and the dancing, they were all Broadway people. And it's only an hour away from New York City. So I was benefited at 17 by working with these people. And I was so unconscious, I didn't really even think that was a big deal. Oh yeah, those are Broadway people, whatever. You know how stupid you are when you're a teenager. And yet, years and years later, when I came to New York, I knew more about how to be a professional person, like have a professional attitude, than some of the people who had gone to drama school knew.
Right.
So these are all, I want the people that are watching who say, well, gee, I don't live in a city and da. I want you to hear that these three artists are telling you how you can start wherever you are in any of these disciplines and use what you have available right there to go on to the next place. And if you're a young person, maybe you'll end up going to a college program. But if you're a middle-aged person or even an older person, you can still do, and you can still be creative. If you just look around in your town, there's always somebody. And I'm pretty sure that Rose Walden is here. Rose, you are here. And
Yes.
Rose came to me years ago as a woman who loved to sing, as an amateur singer. And she hadn't really had any training, but she was a very naturally gifted singer. And we worked, and boy, she practiced, and she got better and better and better. And she made her first CD and did her performances. Rose, can you unmute yourself and just talk about
I did.
what that was like?
A little verklempt here, but I did. Yes. What do you want me to say?
Well, I just want you to let people know that when you started, you were not 25 years old.
No, and I'm now much older than that, and still wanting. That's I don't know if it's a sad thing or if it's a good thing.
No.
It doesn't go away.
Yes, and you didn't you make a second recording?
I did. I have a second CD that just came out, and it was difficult because we finished it up during the pandemic, and I just had to make do and let certain things go. But yes, I did. And with working with Jeanie for the first time, I realized I had 3 octaves available to me. Go figure.
Wow.
Never knew.
Yeah.
Never knew.
Well,
So it changed my life.
It was because you were such a hard worker and you were so naturally gifted. And I'm sorry to throw you on here.
Oh no.
But I wanted people, like, you're a perfect example of what we're talking about. You don't live in the city, and yet you always loved to sing, and you found a way, and then you made these CDs, and I was so proud of you for doing that. So, I want you to be other people to see that, what Rose could do, you could do too.
And Rose, can I ask you, you said you're still wanting. What are you still wanting?
Wanting to perform in front of a cabaret type thing.
Exactly. So I want everybody to hear that. You're wanting to create.
Yeah.
It's not wanting to be a star or wanting to be a millionaire. What you're wanting to create. That's the thing that keeps us going. That is what it's about. No one in this business ever gets paid enough.
It's been there.
No one gets paid what they're worth. No one gets paid enough.
Since
Yeah,
I-
and Rose, David has written a beautiful book about cabaret. You should have some private lessons with him on
Well, there
Zoom.
you go. I have it right here.
Nice.
That's a perfect lead-in. In fact, thank you, Rose. I'm sorry I threw you on there in a hurry, but thank you so much.
It means so much to me, Jeanie. And honestly, I still work with your CDs. You've changed my life. I still laugh at all of our nonsense. And stuff. So it
Bless your heart.
Yeah.
Thank you, dear. All right, now so David, you came in just at the right time. I want you to all of you to talk about your present projects, what's coming up, where people can find you if they are interested. So go ahead, David, talk about the book and other things that you're doing.
Sure. So, yes, I did write a book. This is a book sponsored by the National Association of Teachers of Singing. It is So You Want to Sing Cabaret, the last in their... Billy put the link on Amazon. Great. The last in the series of books of So You Want to Sing. It's also available on cabarethotspot.com. And if you go there, that actually comes right to my office, so I can sign it for you if you want to get it from there. Or you can, oh, thank you, Billy. He put it right there. Or you can get it from Amazon. That's totally fine. It's a really comprehensive book with lots of interviews from stars of cabaret, including real legends like Karen Mason and Steve Ross, K.T. Sullivan, a lot of great things. It's actually, we got a review, it's an academic textbook. We got a review as being a page turner. When have you heard an academic textbook called a page turner? So I'm very happy about that. I came leaping out of the pandemic singing, because one of those things that those 18 months did for me was made me realign my priorities. Now that my children are a little, thank you, Craig. Look at it. Now that my children are a little older, also, as we all experience, to get back to my performing life. So, and Jeanie has come to a few of my shows. I made the decision. I called Feinstein's 54 Below, one of the premier places here in New York. I said, hey, I have a show. They said, sure. Why did that surprise me? I don't know. I did not, but I was surprised. So,
David, I have to say, Jerry and I went there to celebrate our 20th anniversary. It was the first time we went anywhere after the pandemic, and it was absolutely a most wonderful, beautiful evening. It was the perfect anniversary
thank you.
for us.
Did you see, was it November or March?
November.
November, yeah, the Chicago show. That show I'm touring with now all over the country through the year. Once or twice a month, I'm away for a weekend. I'm in Chicago and Davenport's in September. I'm going to Provincetown in August. I'm going to Chicago, the city of Chicago, over 4th of July weekend for the Nats conference, and I'm singing a cabaret style performance there to celebrate the release of the book. We didn't get to do it when it came out because of the pandemic.
So you're going to do your Chicago show in Chicago.
Well, Sue and I are doing a duet show together, since Sue Matsuki is my co-writer on the book.
Right.
So we're doing a different show. We're putting our acts together, as it were, and taking them on the road. And so we're doing that there. I'm working on a Peter Allen show to do at 54 Below in November. I'm going back to Puerto Vallarta with 2 different shows in January, February. So things are happening. And then the last thing I'll say for my commercial here is I have an album. Now, nobody has a CD player, so just pick it up on your... yeah, I don't even have a CD player.
I do.
Okay.
I do
okay.
too.
So you can buy it online at whatever, Amazon, whatever. Or again, for me, I think that's on my website, davidsabella.com. It's called Time Heals. It's on all the streaming platforms. And it is Great American Songbook through the lens of the pandemic. All the arrangements are new, like what I was telling you about, creating new arrangements, putting songs together that don't necessarily go together. This is an album of that. So new ways to hear old songs in honor of the year we went through where everything was slightly askew, right?
Totally great.
Yeah.
All right. And now, Dominique, what's coming up for you?
So I do have a brand new website, so you can get that at dominique.com, and I am going to be doing a gig in Cambridge, Massachusetts, a Sunday afternoon concert at a jazz sushi venue called actually Mad Monkfish. They had to change the name, but it's a concert with a wonderful pianist named Miro Sprague, who's on the West Coast, and he and I just did a little tour that was postponed from before the pandemic. We just did it in March, so it's really fun. He's a really beautiful pianist. The last recording I did is a couple of years old. It's a record on Sunnyside, the Sunnyside label, with a very amazing MacArthur Award-winning pianist Rand Blake. He's a film noir buff and also a jazz musician, kind of an avant-garde jazz musician. But we kind of changed the material, and we're doing a lot of folk stuff. And it was during the before last election cycle, during the Trump election cycle, that we made that recording. I'm very proud of that record, Town and Country, where I sing everything from a Mahalia Jackson tune to a 12-tone row to Appalachian Gene Ritchie song, and all of it kind of hangs together in this sort of reinvestigation of Americana, I guess I'd say. And you can find me at New England Conservatory, and there's on my website information about my teaching. And I also have to say that I have 2 recordings on RCA Victor, which were out of print, and they just put them into the streaming platforms. So there's two recordings that I did when I lived in New York when I was studying with Jeanie in the 90s. I was also signed to RCA Victor just prior to moving back to Boston, and so those 2 albums are now available, which I feel really good about, and the other stuff is getting there. So
it's great. That's really wonderful. And Janice, what's coming up for you?
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted. Can you unmute
Yes.
yourself?
No, I couldn't. Billy just did it. So
Okay.
thank you, Billy. So quickly, I am performing this one-woman show called Inheritance: A Litany at the American Dance Festival, which is one of the oldest dance festivals in the country. It's held on the campus of Duke University every summer. I'll be there doing 4 shows of the piece from July 12th through the 15th. And it's the only piece at this festival, which is really a dance festival, the Lamone Company and Palabolis, and it's really one of the only pieces that incorporates these other art forms, singing, comedy, all of that. And then I'm teaching the workshop for Jeannie's summer intensive, and that is on July 13th while I'm down at the festival. And then I'm teaching a workshop, an interdisciplinary workshop at an incredible place in the woods in Maine called Bairnstow. I gave Billy the link, and it's a very, you eat together, you jump in the lake together. We'll be singing, dancing, doing site-specific work around the space.
Is there an age framework for the people who come?
The more age range, the better. The more I love
good.
the age range. So right now, there are only 10 spots, and there are seven are already taken. So there are 3 more spots. It's not till August 7th through the 13th, but as of now, we have people who were in a piece of mine that I set at Hofstra last year, so they're 22, they just graduated, up until a couple of people who are 70.
Wow.
So you work at your own level, and it's the multi-generational aspect that is probably one of the most beautiful things about it. You will sing, you will dance, you will cry, you will laugh, you will do all these things together. So that's really all I'm doing right now. And I'm working on a new solo, I should say, I'm working on a new one-woman show, because Inheritance, the Litany, is almost 4 years old now. And the new show is called She Remembers Her Amnesia. And it's also a personal narrative. It will be more of a comedy than Inheritance is. And I hope to premiere it in New York in a small little venue in the fall. So,
Yeah, and also, you should talk about your artwork because you just did.
oh, thank
you
you.
had a show at a gallery as a fine artist.
I know, it's crazy. Yes, I had my first art exhibit in March at a gallery here on the Upper West Side with 2 other dance colleagues. And this is interesting. This may have happened to many of you out there because of the pandemic, sort of segueing or veering off into other things that could keep you going, keep you alive. Because I know for me, all of my work went away. All touring, commissions, performances, like everybody. I had teaching, I still had teaching, but that was all done on Zoom. And I had started to make collage work 4 months before the pandemic hit as a way to kind of write a book, write an autobiography, but not in words, in collage, and honor all of the amazing artists that I've had the honor of working with in my career. Everyone from Meredith Monk and Murray Lewis to Nureyev. Also was in a TV show with Placido Domingo, things like that. And I'm making collage work that is also personal narrative. It was such a joy and a thrill to be in this different art form and speak differently about work that was tangible right there on the wall, that you could touch and people could talk about. It wasn't ephemeral like dance is and live performance can be. So yeah, it was a great gift, and I hope to continue that as well.
Creative people are often creative in many, many different forms.
Right.
So now, Billy, do we have any questions?
We have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Let me just scroll up to them.
If you have any comments or questions, people, put them in the chat.
Who are the most inspiring artists that you wish every artist could experience?
Okay, anybody want to answer that?
Well, mine are pretty obvious. Mine are going to be either very well known or you've never heard of them at all. Of course, in the classical world, I go to Maria Callas as a singer and actress. In the music theater world, you know these people already. I'm not going to say Ethel Merman, no, but I'm going to say, people like Kelly O'Hara. If you don't know Kelly O'Hara's voice, Brian Stokes Mitchell, Lilias White, these people who inhabit their songs. And then I'm going to mention someone that you don't know, but you can look her up. She's a singer and a teacher in cabaret. Her name is Lena Koutrakos, Koutrakos, Koutrakos. And as a performance coach and someone who's committed to the words, etc., she's truly transformative. To see her perform is transformative. To work with her in the room is transformative. To work with her online is transformative. She's very accessible and well worth the investigation. So that's my go-to person.
Okay. Janice, you want to say?
Well, I kind of have big names also who have been my lifelong inspirations. In the musical theater world, obviously, it's so obvious that I say Stephen Sondheim, because he's it. He's the man for me, in so many ways. So, of course, you have to listen to Sondheim's work. And through my life, when I've taught, I have mentioned 3 artists, and they are extremely eclectic. And I could go into longer explanations of why they're so important. But it's Beethoven, Joni Mitchell, and Led Zeppelin. Those, and Sondheim, those are my lifelong inspirations and who I go to listen to in terms of music, singing, poetry, writing, headbanging. I mean, Beethoven is a headbanger from way back, and obviously so is Led Zeppelin. So that's what I go to in music. In dance, it's there's kind of, it's just too many people that have inspired me over the years, but it's mostly teachers in dance who were my mentors. Murray Lewis, Elwyn Nicolai, a woman named Annabelle Gamson who did Isadora Duncan work, was just like she was possessed when she danced and when she imparted wisdom to you. And Meredith Monk. Yeah, so those are my...
Great, wonderful. And Dominique, how about you?
Love that. Yeah, I mean, I love so many people, and I love writers. I mean, I'm actually reading Jazz by Toni Morrison right now, which is a fantastic book, and really the language is doing so many wonderful things. She's really inspiring to me as a writer. Something about her inner voice kind of feels like my inner voice and makes me want to write. But I love Duke Ellington. I love Billie Holiday. I love Bessie Smith. I love Sarah Vaughan. I love Thelonious Monk. I have certain idols that people wouldn't necessarily think of, like a little bit more obscure soprano saxophone player named Steve Lacy, who I also do solo work. No looping, no extra anything, just me, my voice telling the musical story. And Steve Lacy was really, really inspiring to me about that. And I had the opportunity to meet Steve Lacy. He came and taught at NEC for the last part of his life. And I loved it because he came to hear me, and he's not a romantic player, I would say. And, romantic with a big capital R. And he said to me, he said, I really like your music, and I can't figure out why.
Yeah, thanks.
Which I loved, because he was hearing something of his aesthetic through me, but it wasn't coming out sounding like a Steve Lacy composition, but something. And this, I think the thing that's most inspiring to me is not the way someone sounds, but the questions I hear them asking. That inspires me, because those are never answered.
I want to share with everybody that I went to see Dominique in a performance here at a jazz club called Sweet Basil, which isn't there anymore. And while I was listening to her sing, I had a kind of transcendental moment, which was like, being cleaved in half. And I saw Dominique as a tree. And I saw myself as the trunk and the roots of the tree. And I saw Dominique as the body of the tree and the branches. And then I saw her students as the leaves. And then I realized that she was representing all the people that have worked with me, who are trees with branches and their students. And I started weeping. And it was the most beautiful moment. And afterwards, I told her, I said, there was something transcendent about your singing, and that it actually touched me to the core of my being. And I'll never forget it. And it was just those kinds of moments where I don't think so much about, I don't think any of us think all that much about our students. Once they're out and they're performing, we're happy for that, we're glad. But then there's that moment where we realize all these ripples that have gone out, and then those people teaching other people and so forth. So it's that constant flow, as you were saying. It really is very beautiful. Now, we're almost out of time. Billy, are there any other hot pressing questions we should answer?
We have a couple of questions about logistics of the Institute. So I'm just going to put the slides up so we can just chat about that for a second.
Great.
So a couple of people were asking about just sort of how they can do it for the time adjusted format. So if you
you talk about that.
Yeah, so if you can't complete the Institute in real time, you can sign up for any of the 3 levels or any of the 4 post-certificate courses, and you'll have 48 hours to complete each day's video archive. The breakout sessions that happen during level 1 and level 2 are scheduled also in a time zone adjusted format, so that you sign up for something that works a little bit better for your time zone, or if you're not available on certain days, they're adjusted so that they can work more with your schedule. So that's available for levels 1, 2, and 3. And then, Jeanie, we also just want to mention our post-certificate courses. Oh, and I can't remember if we said exactly what days. So Janice will be presenting during level 2. So if you're really excited about that, there. And then during level 3 is when we have the joy of David and Dominique's presentations. And then, Jeanie, you want to talk a little bit about Trinice?
Yes, Dr. Trinice Robinson Martin is a gospel, R&B, jazz music expert, and she has developed a special course which is called Soul Ingredients, Science Meets Soul. This is only offered to graduates of our somatic voice work levels 1 and 2. And for this year, for the first time, she has a new level. So she has a level 2. And you can see when those dates are for her. And everybody who takes her course is totally madly in love with Trinice. We all think she's the best of the best. And we hope that people will come and sign up and then get to work with her. Then we also have a course by Dr. Kozan. Dr. Mills, well, either way, Dr. Kozan is a specialist in working with the transgender and gender non-binary clients, both for speech and song. She's a long history as a speech pathologist working in this community. She also is a musician. She plays a piano, she plays a sax, she sings, and is the sweetest, nicest person. And this is a special 3-day course for graduates of the Institute. And then we also have Dr. Claudio Milstein, who is the director of speech pathology at the Cleveland Clinic, which is one of the prestige hospitals in the country. And he has a special program for vocal health for our somatic voice work teachers, so they can learn how to work effectively as a teacher of singing, not a speech pathologist, but a teacher of singing for someone who is recovering from vocal injury or vocal illness under the supervision of a clinician and or a laryngologist. And we don't have the pictures, but we also have in level 1, we have Leah Ross Kugler, who is our speech pathologist this year, giving our vocal hygiene lecture. And we also have Dr. Mark Corey, who is the director of laryngology at Mount Sinai Medical Center, Grobscheit Voice Center. And he is going to be doing a 3-hour medical lecture every year. We have that. It's phenomenal. And so we invite you to join us for somatic voice work. We have a lot of fun. There's all kinds of different diverse courses. Billy has a section that he teaches, and Trinice is also talking about different things within the course. We have Michelle is offering special segments, and Betsy. So we have lots of different faculty members. And then in level 1 and level 2, we do breakouts, which means that you get one-to-one training with a faculty member 3 times in level 1 and 3 times in level 2. So it's not just intellectual information, listening to us talk and looking at slides. You get to sing. You get to make the sounds that we're teaching you to make under the guidance of somebody who is able to say, a little more this way and a little more that way. So you go home with the tools in your hand to use what you've learned. So hands-on practical, that's very important to me. So I have come to the end of our session. I am going to say again, I am profoundly grateful to Janice Brenner, Dominique Eade, and David Sabella for their generous sharing of their time, their life, their experience, and also to Billy Gallner, who is the whiz of our media. He's also a faculty member at the Institute, and to Aaron Petit, who is helping him, and to all of you. Bless your hearts for coming to listen to this wonderful conversation of all these incredible artists and teachers. We hope that this inspires you to join us in the Institute and to see and hear the work of Janice and Dominique and David on your own time. You will not be disappointed. So I hope you all are well. I hope we see you again. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you,
Bye,
Jeanie.
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanie. Thank you, Billy.
Thank you.